Excuse me. All right, we're gonna go ahead and get started. Again, thank you all so much for being here. We're very, very excited to have our next Lunch and Learn in our series of Lunch and Learns focusing on education and educational access, culture, all of that great stuff. Before we dive in, I do want to have I do want to share our land acknowledgement with everyone as the Combined Fund Drive or the UW Combined Fund Drive. We want to use the University of Washington's acknowledgement. And excuse me, I do have a second screen, so I'm not ignoring all of you. I'm just making sure I'm doing it so properly. So the University of Washington acknowledges the Coast Salish peoples of this land, the land that touches the shared waters of all tribes and bands within the Squamish, Tulalip, and Muckleshoot nations. So with that said, we're very excited to have our Education and Literacy Lunch and Learn today, featuring Northwest Education Access, Holocaust Center for Humanity, and the Environmental Science Center. Each presenter will speak about their organization for 10 to 12 minutes. And feel free to send your questions in through the chat. We will have someone moderating the chat so that we can make sure to get all of those questions answered at the end of all three presentations. With that said, we're going to go ahead and start off with Northwest Education Access. Northwest Education Access provides comprehensive and individualized support to help low-income young people, ages 16 to 29, build their own path to higher education and beyond. They're working with over 50 partner sites and over 1,000 students. Northwest Education Access helps students realize and achieve their education goals. So with that, please welcome Nina from Northwest Education Access.
Thank you so much. And thank you for that wonderful introduction. As you were talking, I was like, oh, she's doing such a great job. I guess I can just leave now. I can just head out. You know, she's really hitting all the high notes. So let me go ahead and share my screen. Yeah, so we're at Northwest Education Access. We've been around since 2002 in the Seattle area, and currently we're serving both King and Pierce counties. As Noam read, so we actually just redid our mission statement, so I'm really excited about it in terms of providing comprehensive and individualized support to low-income young people. But what's really special about our program is that we're the only nonprofit in Washington state that focuses on what we call non-traditional youth. And really what that means, because that can mean a lot of things to a lot of people, we're talking specifically about students that have either dropped out of high school or did not go to college or any form of higher education after high school. And there are so many reasons why a student might be in that population. For us, we got our start serving homeless youth. So you have a lot of youth who are looking at the long term, right? They're like, what can I do now to set myself up for success later so I do not have to live with this kind of instability? But as you all know, higher education is really marathon. It is not a sprint. And if you don't have access to your basic needs while you're going through it, it can be really difficult for students to be able to stay in school. Other marginalized populations that we have a real focus on are undocumented students or students who are refugees or are here on asylum. The complicated legal status can make it really difficult for them to secure different kinds of financial aid. And as you know, financial aid is not usually the most accessible even without a lot of that. We also serve a lot of youth who have had challenges with juvenile justice, youth who prefer to go to alternative schools, and definitely a lot of people that are parenting while young, which that is really hitting me hard right now because I have a puppy and I'm like, how am I supposed to do my job well and take care of a dog? And that's been a challenge for me. I do not understand those of you out here who are actively parenting. Just if I had more money or an award, I would give it to you for sure. And that's especially hard for students. So managing young children, toddlers, while going to class and going to work. And now that all of that's virtual, that's all happening in the same house. It can be really difficult for students, especially now. So that's something that's really special about our program. We have really two programs that can be lumped together for college prep and college success. So on our college prep side, we serve students who would like to go into some form of higher ed, but they don't have that high school credential or the GED. And so we help secure that before transitioning over into our college success program, which is where we stay continuously working with that student one-on-one until they get the credential that they came there for. With the population that we're working with, there tends to be a lot of starting and stopping, just because of all of this super huge life challenges that students are dealing with. And that's a big reason why our age range is also pretty unusual. Normally for college access programs, they tend to focus on high school students, and then once you're 18, you kind of age out of most programs. But when we're dealing with issues like homelessness, like resolving a complicated legal status, like parenting, it can take years to get any kind of a handle on any of those factors. And so we want to make sure that students have enough time to kind of figure out, to have the time to get the space to figure out how they're going to proceed. One of my other favorite things about our program is that we're college access organization, but because of the change that we want to create in the community and the world, of course, it's important for us we do a lot of activities that are outside of the typical umbrella of what people consider college access. I have a lot of, my friends or family, they're like, oh, so college access, y'all, I'm from Arkansas, so everybody says y'all. They're like, y'all just be, you help students with personal statements, SAT prep. And that's definitely a part of what we do. But so much of what we do, our answer to this problem is really, when students are ready to succeed, they will. But they also have to have access to the basic needs that are stopping them from being able to be successful in the first place. So for a student that is dealing with homelessness, our first priority is not, okay, here's a GED book, get to work. It's like, let's figure out how we can get you stable housing. Without stable housing, it's going to be really difficult to focus on school. For students that are parenting, childcare is a huge, huge challenge that really disproportionately impacts young women from being able to complete their educations. And so for those students, figuring out stable childcare or daycare might be the one primary thing that is stopping somebody from being able to go to class or participate in class. Or this was more relevant before the pandemic, but of course, transportation can be another huge one. A lot of students, are attending schools in areas that they can't necessarily afford to live in. We have a lot of students in nursing programs at Bellevue College, for example, but they can't afford to live in Bellevue. My younger brother, went to college at Bellevue College, and he just lives by Seward Park. But with the 2 buses, it still took him an hour and a half every day to get to school and to get to work over there. That can be a huge challenge that really adds up over time for a lot of students. So one of the first things we do when a student enters our program is really help do a really basic resource assessment. Do they have food? Do they have shelter? Do they have stability? Do they have the supplies they need to be successful? Because without those foundational pieces, it's going to be really, really difficult for a student to really have the persistence to get through any kind of a program. And it's nice to know that our students are doing really important things like eating, and we would like to help make that happen. So that's one of my favorite things about our program. As you can see from this slide, still almost half of our students have experienced homelessness. So the pandemic definitely did not help us out there. 77% of our students are the first in their families to go to any form of higher ed. And an interesting fun fact on there is that 51% of our students are the first in their families to get a high school diploma or to get a GED. I'm a child of immigrants myself. My parents moved here in high school. They dropped out of high school, immediately after having 5 kids, one of which was me. And so I was the first in my family to get a high school diploma and a bachelor's and a master's. And so that really helps kind of supercharge and power the importance for me of what education is and what that does to your family on a generational sense. So I have a cool video for you. Let's see if we can get that going. Let me stop share. Share this instead.
Seattle Education Access started as a grassroots
Can everyone see this video? Is it showing? Okay.
organization. We work with folks between the ages of 16 to 29 who are low-income in King County.
Before it was Northwest Education Access, I know it as Seattle Education Access. Not only do you have someone in a company to help you, but you also are building up the courage to do this on your own and step out into the world and really become something.
So that's what we do. We provide the same types of support that you might provide for your family or that you might have received from a friend who had been through that process. We're trying to provide that same type of support for every student.
Another thing was finances. How was I going to pay for school? Because it's not cheap. They had a scholarship available as well that I applied for every quarter. They were helping me find other scholarships that I could apply for.
As a way of creating and being that network of support for other youths who were like me, who didn't have it built into their families.
It's a beautiful thing, especially because my journey, it wasn't the typical journey, you know. No one told me that, oh, I could do this in 9 years, even though it's a 4-year degree.
CA fills the gaps, and we support students where they otherwise wouldn't find guidance and help and somebody who is there to cheer you on.
I'm actually back in school right now. I'm attending North Seattle. I'm obtaining an accounting certification as I am on the road to become a CPA.
It's really powerful and it's really impactful for somebody, I think, to be working with Seattle Education Access, and it's a privilege to be a part of so many students in their lives.
Very humbled to be here. I'm very excited to be here, and the amount, again, of commitment that supporters and the staff and the students have shown really stands as testament to how powerful this organization is and what the future can hold.
I don't know where the music's playing from. I thought I closed it. Haha, I figured it out. Okay, well, thank you all so much for your time there. And so I hope that video made you feel any type of way. That one student, Doriana, she was one of our students who's been in our program for... I sing from... Sorry, YouTube started auto-playing. I was like, what is that? What are you doing? Also, what's up with that YouTube algorithm? I've never listened to that song in my whole life. Yes, I just want to thank you all for your time today. I was just going to say that student Doriana is a long-term alumni of our program, and she experienced a pregnancy as a teenager, and now she works for the city of Seattle and is a total boss, and she serves as a mentor in our program for other young students. And so it's just been really impactful to be a part of all of the stories in our journey that we're helping and that are now in these more positions of power that are also giving back to the community. And I would be remiss if I didn't close this out by saying that we're just so grateful for the long-term relationship that we've had with the University of Washington and all of the really talented folks at the University of Washington who have donated their time, their services. I have so many really talented volunteers from UW. We've done, barbecues and taco drives and whatnot to help find scholarships and help. We even have students that are working at UW now who have gotten scholarships powered by UW employees. And so I know in a virtual world, it can be difficult to know if you're really making a difference. And I can just tell you from the nonprofit side, we deeply treasure each gift that we've received, and we're powered by community, and you're one of the communities that really helps supercharge our students' dreams and ambitions. So thank you so much for your time. And I'm looking forward to any questions you might have for me about our program.
Thank you so much, Nina. Thank you for representing the Northwest Education Access. I did a little bit of teaching earlier on in a few chapters ago, and it really is impactful to see where I taught little ones, seeing where none of us are ever done learning. We just all have different paths to achieving and attaining that education. So thank you so much for representing Northwest Education Access and all the incredible work that you do. Our next presenter is near and dear to my heart. I am a grandchild of Holocaust survivors, and so the Holocaust Center for Humanity, I was really excited to be able to moderate and have them present today. The Holocaust Center for Humanity teaches lessons of the Holocaust, inspiring students for all ages to confront bigotry and indifference, promote human dignity, and take action. Unfortunately, it's incredibly pressing right now to make sure that we support this kind of work. And so with that, I'd love to welcome Dee to speak about the work from the Holocaust Center for Humanity.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Noam. And thank you to UW Combined Fund for inviting us to speak on the panel today. The Holocaust education is not, it's just a lot of things. Holocaust education is history, it's social studies, it's ethics, it's politics, and so much more. The Holocaust teaches us the importance of promoting human dignity, teaches students to take action and to speak out against bigotry and indifference. I'm going to share a PowerPoint with you. Let's see if I can get that going. Right, there we go. All right, thank you. Now, can everyone see that? Okay. Our center reaches over 40,000 students every year in the Pacific Northwest. That's our footprint. But it's really not about the numbers. It's about how we touch the hearts and souls of students in a way that teaches them to learn from history. When students visit our center, and we get about, before COVID, we had about 2 to 3 school buses a day. When they visit the center, we have them sit down and think about times when they have been discriminated against or have been made to feel other than who they are. And that starts them thinking about empathy. It starts them to connect to themselves and to our museum. Once in our museum, we share stories of local Holocaust survivors as a way of connecting them to empathy and a way of teaching history through experience, through storytelling, if you will. I'm going to keep going here. This is students before COVID. A recent national study showed that students who study the Holocaust are more likely to challenge hate and prejudice when they see it, and they're more likely to speak out. And really, our Holocaust Museum is all about understanding the past and using that knowledge to change the future. Our artifacts all connect the past to today. So students, you see this picture that we have a lot of interactive components in our museum. Since COVID, we've taken field trips virtual, and so now we have online live virtual field trips with hundreds of kids at home watching a docent take them through the museum. It's very exciting. But before COVID, students could come in and they could experience it in that space with a lot of interactive components. I'm going to give you an example of sort of how we use our artifacts to teach about history. We have a whole section in our museum about propaganda. And so in that section of our museum, we talk about how the world changed and how propaganda changed people's minds, how someone could go from being friends with their neighbors to turning their neighbors into deportation, and how propaganda played such a crucial role. In conjunction with that lesson, we teach students about media today. How do you tell the difference between fact and opinion? What's our obligation to find the truth and to dissect media as we see it? As a matter of fact, today we're having a teacher training with 85 teachers led by the Media Literacy Project on just this subject. How do you get teachers to teach this lesson of media literacy? I'm going to show you just a few more pictures. When students come to the center or when they engage in our curriculum, they're really challenged to think about how they walk in the world, how they react to other people. At the end of our museum, at the end of the tour, we have a big sign that says, "What will you do?" And basically what we teach them is, I don't know if you're familiar with something called the pyramid of hate. The pyramid of hate is something where the very top of the pyramid is genocide. And the bottom of that pyramid, the base, if you will, is things that you and I see every day. Scapegoating, jokes, you know, just malicious words. The things that we see every day is really the base of what is the beginning of any genocide. And that's something that we see every day, and we have the power to control, and we have the power to stop. And that's the basic lesson. This video is somebody watching virtual reality Anne Frank annex right there. And students are also encouraged to reflect on how this is relevant today. We have lessons related to slave labor and what it looked like then and what slave labor looks like today with so many people, 23 million people today in forced labor globally. Students are really challenged to think about their world, to dissect every part of it. Here, we'll keep going a little bit. We invite other organizations to come and present. Now we have lunch and learns once a week where organizations can present, and we have traveling exhibits. Really, this is a way of bringing other topics to our platform. So we have had traveling exhibits related to and professional development courses related to LGBTQ communities, not only in America, but globally. The Rohingya crisis, many topics outside of the Holocaust that really relate and allow people to think of the Holocaust in a more global, universal context. We also challenge people to think about their role. You know, in Nazi Germany, the Nazis could have never killed 6 million people on their own. It took willing collaborators in every territory that they occupied. So we challenge students to think about, we have this canister of Zyklon B in our museum. We don't really talk about what that was used for, the death machine. What we talk about is what did it take to get that canister from point A to point B? Who were the people who created the gas? Who were the people and scientists who invented the pellets? Who were the people who tested them? Who were the people who created the packaging? Who were the people who was the graphic designer who made the label on this can? You know, when you start to think about all the people, who were the people that transported this canister? You start to think about all the people that were engaged in getting this can from one point to another, and what were they doing? What were they telling their families? What did they know? You begin to understand that collaboration is key to any kind of human tragedy. And what we have to do is think about our role when we see things happening and learn to speak out. We have, among our resources, we have an active speakers bureau that is now online, and they speak to thousands of students every year. They're Holocaust survivors, they're children and grandchildren of survivors, they're people from tribes, people from other walks of life who go to schools and present. We also have teacher trainings. We start with the teachers because it's critical to really begin with teacher training. We have traveling trunks, and now with COVID, we have book-by-book programs that get resources in the hands of students. In 2019, Washington State passed Senate Bill 5612, which ensures that every student in our state has quality Holocaust education. And now our center is able to work with OSPI to make sure that this reaches every student. When we opened our museum in 2015, we started also working with the public, the greater public. And that's something that we hadn't done before. Since we opened the museum, we were able to have community events, and most of those community events are online, that focus on relevant topics today. We're also able to extend our police training program. We train all Seattle police officers, and now we're starting to work in Kent and other districts. It's a 4-hour value training that police officers need to take in our museum, and it really grounds them in values. It's not necessarily bias training, it's a little bit different, but it's very impactful, and we know that they learn quite a bit from that experience. We also partner with numerous organizations to bring programs about Japanese internment and other relevant programs to this region. Redlining, different things that happened right here in our backyard. Since we've all gone virtual. We've introduced some new and exciting programs. Our book by book program actually puts books in the hands of children throughout the state, and that's been an overwhelming success. All of our programs have gone virtual, including our field trips, our professional development, and as a result of the legislation, we created a very comprehensive curriculum and activities that students can do at home. Teachers can teach from this curriculum and activities, and they can also, either in the classroom or at home, they can have access to it. In closing, I'd like to say that the center's work is more critical now than it has ever been. With the passing of the legislation, we have many, many more teachers coming to us for help, coming to us because they are new in the subject and they need our help. At the same time, they're struggling with how to teach this subject and how to teach in general, but also how to teach empathy and compassion. They're telling us that their students are exposed to much more hate through online sources and social media sites than they've ever been exposed to before. And the teachers feel a responsibility to address that issue and feel like they just can't wait. And so they're looking for us for help. All of the center's resources are free. So providing, and this really allows us to provide equal access to all communities across our state. So please join us, help us. We are going to be struggling to meet the demand as a result of the legislation. So any support is greatly appreciated. And we thank you so much for allowing us to share our story. And thank you. I hope to answer questions later.
Thank you so much, Dee. I'm blown away by the just how immersive you are how inclusive you are to the entire community. Everything from, schools, teachers, to the police officers, general community, and also that it's not just what I've grown up thinking of as the Holocaust, but so many genocides that we need to do our part to help deter in the future and currently. Thank you, Dee, and for representing the Holocaust Center for Humanity. We are now going to move on to our final speaker and then questions and answers. So if you have some questions, make sure you send them in the chat so we can ask them later. So next up, we've got Joanna from the Environmental Science Center. So since 2000, the Environmental Science Center promotes environmental stewardship and academic achievement through science-based education. The quality experiential environmental education programs take place in and feature local beaches, streams, forests, and classrooms in South King County to promote environmental stewardship. Welcome, Joanna, and we can't wait to hear about the Environmental Science Center.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Noam, for that introduction, and for the UW Combined Fund Drive for having us and putting this on. I know we're all coming up with new ways to hold our events, so I really appreciate you inviting us to be here today. So we are an environmental nonprofit out of Burien, Washington, and our mission has two parts, and that is inspiring an interest in the natural world by bringing students out to their parks in their backyard, as well as closing the achievement gap. We work primarily in South King County, in Highline, and Renton and Kent districts. So we have two main field studies. One of our field studies is in the fall. It's centered around salmon health and salmon habitat. So, and then in the spring, we bring students to the beach at low tide and show them some of the organisms that are normally covered by water that are now uncovered by the low tide. So our Salmon Heroes program is going on now. We have 80 classes registered for our virtual version of our Salmon Heroes program, but pre-COVID, it was a two-part program. We would go into the classroom and introduce students to some of the challenges salmon face throughout their lives. We had an egg marble model where students, as salmon face different challenges like predators or polluted stormwater, they would scoop out the eggs and we'd end up with only 2 at the end. And then we'd go to a field site where there are spawning salmon students would be able to observe salmon swimming in the river, spawning, fighting other salmon for habitat. They would dissect a salmon, they would collect water quality data, they'd also become a salmon, play a big game, see if they could survive some of the challenges salmon face. And then we'd go back in the classroom after their field trip and we'd analyze the water quality they collected and really talk about, so what is your role in protecting this habitat and preserving the watershed that we all share? And so in the spring, we go to Seahurst Beach, which is in Burien, Washington. It's kind of a hidden gem if you've never been there before. The University of Washington does research there in the spring because there was a really famous seawall restoration project where they removed almost a mile of seawall. So it also has a really great rocky habitat for sea stars, anemones, crabs. And many of the students that we work with have not had a chance to have a field trip outside of their classroom or haven't gotten a chance to, even if they've been to Seahurst, maybe not at the low tide. So it's always so wonderful to see the look on students' faces when they get squirted by their first clam or touch their first sea star. And we work to close the achievement gap and remove some of the barriers by offering program subsidies, as well as transportation reimbursements to our field trip sites. And last year, 90% of our students received a program subsidy and transportation reimbursement. So the cost was not a limiting factor to exploring these amazing habitats. We also really believe in fostering the next generation of environmental leaders. So we have a teen leadership program, students on our curricula, and they work alongside naturalists and lead certain elements of our field study with students. And we also have restoration at Seahurst Park, as well as parks that are walkable from many of the schools that we work with, so students can restore habitats in their backyard. And I just remember a student that I talked to who we've been doing restoration for 3 months together, and they came up to me at the end and said, you know, I used to vandalize this park, but now I really see how much work goes into building these trails and keeping this park going, and I'm going to work to protect it. So that was something that was really meaningful to me. So here's a short video showing some very excited students in our programs.
Where's the eggs? Oh, I see it. How many do you see? I see 3. Exactly 3. There's like 2 on my head.
Remember we could do in-person field trips. So we are still doing field trips even amidst COVID. So we've adapted our spring beach program. We had this opportunity to really enhance this program. So we created an advanced version of this. Our Beach Heroes program often fills up within like a week of sending out registration. And often students who maybe had this field trip in kindergarten might be registered again in the 3rd grade. So we wanted to offer a program that really built on the program they may have received when they were older. So we introduced this data collection, an advanced Beach Heroes, where they have a chance to collect data on the beach that we're exploring and look at the organisms that live in each of the tide zones. And we also had the opportunity to kind of enhance our field materials. We created a beach guide that was images all taken at Seahurst Beach. So this beach that's in the students' backyard, translated into English and Spanish. We could have Vietnamese, Somali, we could have 8 other languages to best serve, but it's a start, English and Spanish, so that especially the students create field guides in the classroom, but especially the chaperones that come to the beach, and if they're handed this field guide to help guide the program, it's more tangible. It has images of the organism found there, and should be easier for them to access. And also for our after school programs, we recognize when this pandemic hit that we're no longer serving students, we're actually serving families at this point. So we created these kits full of activities and science explorations that families could do together. And we also recognized, especially in March and April, that not all students had access to a computer. Even if they had a computer from their school, they might not have internet access. So we created these kits that did not require access to a computer, and they had guides of when the low tides were, some of our stars messaging, and our field guides, so that families could go to the beach together in pods to explore. And it also had, if they weren't able to make it to the beach, it also had some activities and memory games they could do at home together. So we delivered these to our New Futures partners with Southwest Youth and Family Services right to the apartments. And we also delivered them to 3 different sites in Renton. And we originally made 100 kits thinking like, oh, that's gonna be way too many. But we delivered over 1,000 kits to families in Renton. It was just so clear that families were really looking for activities to do at home. And we were able to set up some of our models that we normally use in the classroom for our spring field trip, and interact with students from a distance with masks about some of the adaptations on the beach. So we were just overwhelmed by how many families showed up to these science kit events. And I remember, this is Orion and I were there. I remember we talked to 3 middle school girls for 20 minutes. And I'm just like, that's just telling of how the times we're in right now, that these 3 middle school girls wanted to talk to these nerdy naturalists for 20 minutes. You know, we're just so starved for connection. So I wanted to invite you all to join us in these efforts, because we weren't able to have, you know, our community festivals this summer, and our in-person fundraiser. Our program has really taken a hard. So you can learn more about us on our website and ways to donate there. And we also invite you all to become a member. So at a really low monthly cost, you can make a big impact in these kits that we're sending out to families, as well as I didn't talk much about our virtual field trips. We naturalists are in the field with an iPad. So we have a recorded version of our salmon program if teachers decide to go that route, but we also have naturalists on the river with an iPad, able to conduct the tests in real time with students, and students are able to, in the chat box, share, I think this river is healthy, or I think that tree provides shade to the river, and make observations on the water quality data as well. So thanks again for having me, and let me know if you have any questions, and I invite you all to join us in our efforts.
Thank you so much, Joanna. Wow, like I am blown away by the, just the diversity and the type of programs you do during the year and what you're able to offer. I'm always super stoked to see people care about the environment, even if it's because they're bored. I'll take it. Get involved, get out there, see the world, and take care of it. So thank you so much for sharing the great work that the Environmental Science Center is doing. I am going to turn it over to my colleague, Elise, who is going to kind of facilitate the question and answer portion of our Lunch and Learn. I know I have I'm always bursting with a bunch of questions, but if you have any questions, please send them through the chat so that she can make sure we get your answer. Elise, over to you.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I was also so impressed by all of the work that everyone is doing. I am also Jewish, so all of the work at the Holocaust Center for Humanity is just incredible, and it's really great that it's happening here in Seattle, and just all of the work going on. Yeah, it's just very exciting. So, Noam has a few questions, and it seems like she's asking for Northwest education access. Do you provide additional support to students, such as financial literacy or health practices? And what are unique ways you are providing support to students during COVID? And I've seen that throughout all of your work. I was just so impressed by how unique and creative you've been in order to, really access and still create education despite COVID.
Oh, thank you so much. So yes, health can be a huge challenge for students. As I mentioned before, in the unique work that we're doing, we really want to help students tackle what are those challenges that are preventing them from being able to go and stay through school. And so health can definitely be one of the things that we have or health-related debt, because we live in this country, can definitely be one of the pieces that really makes it difficult for students to maintain their schooling. And yeah, financial literacy is one of, I think, our more robust pieces. And one of the areas where we have a lot of exciting traction around volunteerism. I have some really fabulous volunteers that help do regular trainings. I mean, when it comes to our relationship with money, it's such a fundamental piece that's not required for you to learn throughout like the public education system. And if you're coming from a low income family, it can be especially difficult to have an opportunity to learn about these concepts. I mean, so my family dealt with homelessness when I was young for many years. So as an adult, it really took a lot of unlearning bad financial habits for me to get a handle on myself. I mean, it did not occur to either of my parents of like saving. That's a concept. Retirement. How does that work? So we definitely help students, to try to maximize the limited budgets that they have. And that's definitely, like I said, an area where volunteers tend to get really involved as well, and helping to make that fun and exciting. And we've had some exciting events, which, will look differently now in the future around helping students to learn budgeting and other key financial tools. When it comes to COVID, the pandemic has hit students especially hard, as it's hit all of us really hard in terms of how it's impacted our population and what we're doing about it. There are a few really specific key things. Students have been, young people have been really disproportionately financially impacted by the pandemic. They tend to have much more transient jobs. They tend to have less like emergency savings, if they have any savings at all. And so we've seen a real uptick in students who just do not have access to basic needs. I run a committee of volunteers that makes decisions around like how much we're giving out in terms of like tuition assistance and textbooks and help and things like that. But throughout the pandemic, the kinds of requests that I'm getting are just the most basic needs you can think of. Things like feminine hygiene products, baby formula, diapers, groceries, help for back pay on bills. They're like, we'll figure it out without textbooks, but my baby needs to eat today. And the other big thing are like technology. That's been one of the biggest challenges, and one of the things we're more capable of doing. So what we've done about it is we did several rounds of fundraising. So we raised over $70,000 in emergency funds, some from UW employees who have been really helpful with that. And so we've allocated all of that money in multiple rounds to help students with those direct needs that I just talked about. So groceries, rental assistance, and whatnot. So to help make sure that students aren't losing their housing and that they do have like their basic needs covered. The other huge piece is just, technology. Now that school is virtual, a lot of students did not have the infrastructure at home in order to go to school virtually. We have a lot of low-income students where prior to the pandemic, they were, they didn't have computers at home, which was never convenient for them, but they did have other options. They can use the library at UW. They can go to a local library to use computers, and that's just not an option so much anymore. So we also have been doing laptop drives and finding like technology funds, students really, just to help students get computers at homes and access to internet, because if you don't have those two things right now, you just cannot be in school. So that's really where we've been putting our efforts. Thank you for the question.
Yeah, thank you. And then Brady had also been wondering how people get involved. How do they find your program?
Yeah, a lot of different ways. So we have over 50 local partnerships. We get a lot of referrals. Because of the unique student population that we serve, our students often don't qualify for help at other organizations. And so we have that really big network of partner sites right at every community college in King County, and then now a new site in Tacoma as well. So we get a lot of referrals from other programs where, the student approached us, but they are outside of the age, that we are serving, or they need something that's outside of our service area. Prior to the pandemic, everything's virtual now, but it's important for us to be accessible to students. And so we place our staff members in locations where we're going to be able to talk to students who are going to be a good fit with our program. So we have partnerships with a lot of youth, young adult homeless shelters. So staff members typically spend time there every week. And, we don't pressure them. It's just students know who we are. And if they want to have a conversation about getting back into school, they know where to find us, and like we just make that available for them as well. But, we don't maintain a waiting list. We serve a little over 1,000 students. We tend to serve about 100 more students each year. It really just depends on the balance. Since our program is so individualized, each student is paired to work one-on-one with a case manager. And so, we do have to be careful about our growth to make sure that each student is still receiving that high standard of care. But yeah, we're getting more popular all the time. I was hired a few years ago to do marketing. To this day, I've never done that much specific marketing, but we get a lot of calls from students for help. So they're finding us somehow. When I crack this case, I will be a genius.
Thank you so much. Yeah, I'm just so impressed with the work that you do. And I'm going to ask this to everyone. Do you have any upcoming events that you'd like to plug to our audience right now?
Sure. Every Tuesday at noon, from noon to 1, we have adult education programs. So I encourage you to just go to our website, Holocaust Center Seattle, and every Tuesday eat lunch and enjoy a program. They're educational, they're interesting, sometimes they're local Holocaust survivors telling their story. Sometimes it's children of survivors. So every Tuesday.
That's wonderful. All right, and Brady asked for D, is there any noticeable difference in attitudes, understanding of the Holocaust among the young people the center educates now compared to 20 years ago? Have you seen any kind of generational shift?
Yeah, I think the biggest shift is that students are exposed to so much more hate than they were. And I think the sort of incivility that has resulted in the last 4 years has caused a lot of sort of upheaval in schools. We have a program now that actually goes into the schools and works with the administrators to help them when they tackle issues. Years ago, if a swastika was painted on a locker or the N-word was used, sometimes it would make the paper. I mean, sometimes it was, such a horrible thing. Now it happens all the time. And so, our work is just so much bigger than it used to be. And I think now, school administrators are understanding their role in a way that they didn't in the past. And so we're working much more close with sort of the systems that operate within schools to protect students.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and then we had some other questions for you. What are the ages that students first start coming to the museum?
Yeah, we start students at the age of, the 10th grade, 5th grade. So about 9, 10 would be the youngest. Of the 5th grade.
Great. And then the last one is, how do you face, or is there any backlash from students or parents with your programming?
We've never had backlash from students or teachers. It's been, I think most people understand the universal message, and they're, I think we've never had backlash. We've had anti-Semitic stuff sometimes. But that's kind of goes with the territory.
It does. All right, thank you so much. So I'm going to move over to some questions for Joanna. And Joanna, you're also welcome if there's any events that you'd like to promote. We'd love to hear about them.
Yeah, we have an adult lecture series centered around stormwater coming up in December. So there's more information on our website. We have some amazing speakers lined up for that event.
Great. And then some of the other questions are, what ages are the kids you generally work with? Is there an age group?
Yeah, so I didn't talk about much, but we also have a weekly toddler program that is free for kids. And that is, well, now it's virtual, but normally it's Wednesday mornings. And so that's with the toddlers. And then there's a Tiny Trees campus at the park that kind of works with the preschoolers. And then our Beach Heroes program is kindergarten through 3rd grade, is a focus, with 3rd grade being the advanced option with the data collection. And then our Salmon Heroes program is 4th grade through middle school, centered around Highlines Land and Water Unit, and Renton Salmon Unit. And then our high school students participate in our restoration programming, as well as our teen leadership junior naturalist programs. And some of those team leaders have actually moved on to become paid naturalists with us. Their applications fall above, recent biology grads, because they have experience in the field with our students doing our programs.
Well, that's great, because that actually leads into my next question, which is there a part of the program that encourages students to study science in the future? And it seems like, fostering that really young encourages them to go into those fields later in life.
Yeah, I definitely remember raising salmon in a classroom when I grew up in the Seattle area, raising salmon, and some of the outdoor field trips were some of the most memorable for me. So we really encourage students we have flyers that are sent home to each student in English and Spanish that have to continue the conversation in home about what they learned and what they can do for these habitats. So we really can ask students to continue these conversations at home and learn more about what they can do.
That's great. All right, well, are there any other questions? I think we're almost done, and it's really great to hear so much from all of you. And yeah, I love the emphasis on education, but also I think the three of you are such a good example of how different education can look and how many different forms of education there are. So yeah, I will turn it back over to Noam to finish up our Lunch and Learn. Thank you.
Thank you, Elise. Thank you again to all of our incredible presenters and everyone who came and participated. Like I said at the beginning, we are recording this, so it'll go on our website, and we encourage you, if you have colleagues, peers, family, friends who are interested in education, who have been touched by education, we encourage you to check out the recorded Lunch and Learn later. And if you've been moved by any of our wonderful speakers, we really encourage you to take advantage of the platform of the UWCFD to make the donation. You can, super easy, you can do it with a payroll deduction. Our database and all of that website is working again, so please, we encourage you, if you've been touched by any of our incredible speakers today or any of the thousands of partner charities, please support them. On behalf of the UW-CFD, I do have a couple more announcements. Our Lunch and Learn series is going strong. Next week we have Arts and Culture, which will be really great. We also have a couple of other events coming up. We're sharing some of our partner charity events on our websites, so make sure you look that up and you keep connected, you keep in touch. We really appreciate everyone being here today. And with that, please stay safe, be well, and have a great afternoon.